People often ask me, is it possible to get a VA loan if you have balanced checks? It's an interesting topic, something that comes up every so often. And in this video, I want to explain a little bit about bounce checks and bounce check policies, official VA guidance, on also how underwriters see it. Um, and I see two extremes on this. Some people think that, oh my gosh, I bounced one check, my life is over, I'll never get a loan. And other people just think that they can bounce everything like crazy and nothing matters. And the truth is actually a little bit in between. So if you have a bounce check on your checking account the past couple months, be sure to watch the entire video, as I will explain exactly the guidance step by step through this process. So the first thing to know is there's no official VA guidance on this. The VA handbook does not address this at all. It basically says use your best judgment. It is considered a negative factor. I will tell you that. Every underwriter will consider a negative factor, but it's not a deal breaker. That being said, there are lender overlays. A lender overlay is a rule over and above what the VA requires. And so certain lenders will say absolutely no bounce checks, no ifs, ands, or buts. And there's a lot of underwriter discretion. A lot of times it's more a comfort level of the underwriter, because what the VA actually, the handbook actually says is use your best judgment on this, which means underwriter discretion, which means gray areas. So the good news on that is you can shop around. As a full service mortgage broker licensed in multiple states, approved with 150 lenders, oftentimes I will send the scenario in multiple lenders, because one lender might like it, the other lender might not. And then we just have to figure out who likes it and send it that way. One thing that isn't common, though, anything bounced will need to be explained. They want to know two things. One, why did it happen? And two, how are you going to not have it happen again? How do you prevent it from happening a second time? And I'm going to give you two very specific scenarios that happened to me recently, to explain this process a little bit further. So the first one, on paper, it looked like I was going to approve it. It was a mid 600 score, about 610 credit score. The credit looked pretty good. I mean, there was nothing late in the past year, which is good. And so I was actually about to approve the file. But then I get his bank statement and I see that literally he kept the thing under $100 basically every month, and it oftentimes went under, and had about 3 bounce checks per month. On the bank statements he sent me 2 bank statements. Both of them had 3 bounce checks each. On the top of the statement, the bank actually told me how much he had paid in the past year in bounce check fees, and he had paid about $950 in bounce check fees, which would show that he had close to 30 bounce checks over the past year, which is not good. That's a major problem. And so I asked him what's going on. He's like, well, I had some issues here and issues there. And more importantly, I asked him, how are you going to prevent this from happening again? Or is there any sort of change of income, any sort of change in habits? And even worse, he was trying to buy a house that was twice the amount of his rent, and he couldn't give me a good reason. And so we ended up declining that file. Now I'll give you a second scenario, one that we actually approved, that we did have good news on, where he had a debit card, and unfortunately the debit card, he thought he had some sort of like preventative measure where they would not allow the card to go through if it went in negative. Well, that was not the case. Apparently this debit card it's called a tolerance, where basically the bank will let you actually have a negative balance, and they'll charge you that $35 fee and just let it roll. And that's what happened, that he actually didn't check his bank account closely enough. He had a couple large debit card transactions, and they allowed it to go negative. He went about $200 negative. Now, he did explain that he did not realize that happened, but more importantly, he said why it would not happen again. And the reason it would not happen again is because he got a new job that paid significantly more than what he was making at the time that the transaction happened. And so we were able to get that approved, actually closed out last week in Texas. And so that's one case where we were able to have that. It was a negative factor, but we were still able to close it. And sometimes it's just best to wait. Luckily, we only look at 2 months of bank statements. So if you have a bounce check or two and you can't explain it and don't have a real good reason we can use, sometimes we can just wait and just not use the bank statement. And that's okay too. I tell people it's not always a no, sometimes it's not today. So those are a few things about bounce checks and VA loans. I hope this helps. As always, any questions about VA loans or anything in particular, feel free to give me a call, 937-572-3713 or scarpero.com. Talk to you soon. Bye.